The fog was thick as we wound our way into the Cascades. Pines loomed on either side of the road like silent witnesses. Callie sat beside me, her sketch pad on her lap, but she wasn't drawing. Not like usual. Her eyes kept shifting to the rearview mirror, then to the trunk area behind us. "Grandma," she said finally, her voice low but firm. "I saw Dad put a black bag in the trunk this morning." I glanced at her. "When?" "Before you came out. He was in the garage. A man came to the door. I was getting my backpack and heard them talking. Dad said, 'She'll be across the state line by sundown. She won't check.'" My stomach twisted. I pulled off onto a narrow turnout beside a grove of trees, parked, and killed the engine. We sat in silence for a few seconds. Then I unbuckled, walked around to the back, and opened the trunk. There it was. A black canvas duffel tucked under our weekend bags. I didn't open it, not yet. I looked back at Callie. She hadn't moved. She sat perfectly still, her hands gripping the sketch pad like it could shield her. "We're not going to Oregon," I said, closing the trunk. "But we're not going home either." I took the next exit and drove east away from the highway, away from the GPS route Grant had insisted I use. We passed small towns, shuttered gas stations, forests, still wet with spring mist. We finally pulled into a weather-worn motel behind an abandoned diner. I paid in cash, signed Edna Lawley, and asked for a room farthest from the road. Inside, I double-locked the door and shut the curtains tight. Callie sat on the bed, hugging her knees. I opened the duffel. Cash, passports, a pistol, and something else I hadn't expected: intent. This wasn't panic. This was design. I didn't touch the money. I just stared at it, the neat bands of cash, the pristine fake passport with my name and photo, and a second one blank, ready to be filled. The pistol sat beneath them like a silent dare. Sleek. Loaded. I zipped the bag closed with hands that did not shake. I had lived through snowstorms widowed young and raised a son through drought and fire. I knew fear. I also knew how to bury it when needed. Callie was curled on the edge of the bed, watching me, small and serious. "Are we okay?" she asked. "We will be," I said. I removed the passports and slipped them into the lining of my hiking backpack. The cash I tucked beneath my flannel shirts in the drawer. The pistol I wrapped in a towel and slid into the mini-fridge behind the ice tray. The bag itself I returned to the trunk, still heavy enough to pass for untouched. Grant couldn't know we'd opened it. I turned off my phone. If there was a tracker, it needed to go quiet now. I removed the SIM and battery for good measure. Then I lay beside Callie in the motel bed, our boots still on the curtains drawn, and the night pressing against the windows like held breath. At 9:13 p.m., the motel phone rang. I didn't answer. The clerk didn't knock, but I saw his shadow outside. The next morning, I paid for one more night and told Callie we'd be leaving early, just not in the direction her father thought. She didn't ask questions. We drove north, then east, skirting the main roads. I pulled off at a quiet fishing cabin I'd once stayed in long ago. The key still worked. The air smelled of cedar and mud and safety. Callie drew by the window while I unpacked the backpack and slid the passports into the hollow of an old floorboard. I sat in the rocker with a thermos of tea and listened to the wind. We were off the map now, and no one, not even Grant, would find us unless I allowed it. Doi jai la fien ban ja chin sua tuan. Bo Chapter 3. Jeluai bochi. Tiet thiu. Hop li viviek. Ke Grant biet so jien toai. Tratrok. Jong toi. Gyu vung kam giak. Kang thang va jung. Logic an now. The next morning, I turned on my old phone for the first time since we disappeared. I didn't plug it in. Just slotted the battery back in and waited for the screen to light up. 3 voicemails, all from Grant. The first was soft. Too soft. "Hey, just checking in. Thought you'd be at the lodge by now. Callie doing okay?" The second firmer. Mom, I called the lodge. They said you never checked in. Did you take a wrong turn or something? The third tight-clipped. You're making this harder than it needs to be. No texts, no missed calls after that. Just silence. I turned the phone off again, removed the battery, and slid it into the zipper pouch of my old Ranger vest. If he was tracking it, that signal had gone dead the moment we left the main road. Callie was sitting on the floor of the cabin, drawing pine cones. She looked up as I tucked the phone away. He's looking, isn't he? Yes, I said. She nodded once. No fear in her eyes now. Just alertness. She was beginning to understand the kind of man her father had become and the kind of woman I needed to be now. We spent the rest of the day indoors. I repacked the duffel empty now and tossed in towels to match the weight. Left it in the trunk in case someone came snooping. That night while Callie slept, I sat at the small kitchen table with a pad of lined paper and wrote down every interaction I could remember. Dates, phone numbers, conversations half overheard, patterns I'd once dismissed as harmless. It wasn't just about what was in that bag. It was about the slow erosion of trust, of being used for years without ever realizing it. The next morning, I took the rental car and drove into a small town an hour away. There in a feed store with no cameras, I bought a prepaid burner phone with cash. Then I stepped outside, dialed a number I hadn't called in a decade, and waited. When Romy picked up, I only said 3 words. I need help. The ranger station sat at the edge of a dried-up lake bed, its green painted trim faded by wind and time. I hadn't been there in years, not since they'd repurposed it as a field outpost for local enforcement. But it was still familiar, the way the steps creaked, the way the trees opened around the clearing, like a held breath. I parked out back and walked in through the old staff door. Romy Salveson looked up from behind a desk stacked with folders. Her hair was shorter now, streaked with silver, and her badge sat clipped to a field vest instead of a uniform. Her eyes widened when she saw me. Eldra? I nodded once. She stood slowly. I thought you'd vanished off the map. I have, I said, and I need to stay that way for now. I placed the envelope on the table and pushed it toward her. Inside were the photos of the passports, the cash serials, and a copy of the call log from Grant's last voicemail. She opened it, scanning page by page, her jaw tightening. Your son? Yes. Do you know what this is? I nodded. Trafficking, maybe? Definitely laundering. Someone was supposed to intercept me at the lodge. I wasn't meant to question the bag, just carry it across state lines and keep driving. And the girl, my granddaughter. She saw him take the bag from someone. That's why we turned around. Romy set the pages down and leaned back. Eldra, this matches a task force case we've had on ice for months. Courier profiles, forged IDs, payment exchanges across family lines, I figured. But we need a voice, she said. His voice. Talking. Admitting something. That's the only way we can act fast? I didn't blink. I can get that. Are you sure? I nodded again. She slid a tiny recorder across the desk toward me. Don't confront him. Let him do the talking. And keep the girl safe. I've got her, I said. Romy stood. Do you want me to bring someone with you? No, I said. I raised him. I know how he talks. And I know how to make him speak without even knowing he's confessing. I called Grant from a payphone near a closed-down fire tower. He picked up on the first ring. Where the hell have you been? I'm safe, I said. So is Callie. He exhaled. Mom? Listen, this whole thing got out of hand. You weren't supposed to get scared. It's just business. I need to explain it to you in person. I'll meet you, I said. Pine Valley Diner. Tomorrow at noon. Come alone. He paused. Are you sure you want to do this? I'm done running, I said. It's your turn to explain. I hung up before he could ask more. My heart was pounding, but my hands were steady. I returned to the cabin and spent the evening with Callie, showing her how to load film into a disposable camera, pretending like we were just two travelers resting. She didn't ask why I'd left earlier. She didn't need to. Her eyes had changed since that night in the fog, wiser, sharper. The next day, I wore my hiking vest, slipped the recorder into the breast pocket, and tucked Callie's sketchbook under my arm. We arrived 15 minutes early. Callie waited in the car with a book and a thermos of cocoa. I told her to stay put, no matter what. Inside the diner, I took a booth by the window. The waitress poured me coffee. I kept my eyes on the door. Grant arrived on time. Neat, buttoned-down, polished shoes, casual charm, pasted on like aftershave. He slid into the booth. "You look tired. You look nervous." We made small talk until I asked about the bag. He smiled thinly. "You worry too much. It was just a delivery. Clean hands, clean driver. That's the system. You don't need to know more. Who was supposed to meet me at the lodge? Someone who pays well. And if I'd been stopped, you wouldn't have. That's the point." He chuckled. "Besides," he added, stirring his coffee, "you're perfect for this. No record, no questions. You're invisible, Mom." I didn't smile. I leaned back and let the recorder do its work. Let him bury himself one word at a time. I didn't return to the cabin right away. After Grant left the diner, I waited 15 minutes, paid for my coffee, and drove west toward a supply shack by the ranger station where Romy said she'd be. She was already waiting outside, leaning against a Forest Service truck with her arms crossed. "Did you get it?" she asked. I nodded and handed over the recorder. She plugged it into a field tablet and listened with earbuds. Her face didn't move, just the occasional blink, the faintest twitch in her jaw when Grant said, "You're invisible, Mom." After 2 minutes, she stopped it. That's enough to bring him in, at least for questioning. Maybe more. "Will it hold?" I asked. "With what you gave me earlier, it's a solid start. But we'll need to catch him trying again or prepping someone else." I looked out across the trees. "He thinks he's untouchable. He's not," Romy said. "But he is clever. We'll move carefully." I handed her copies of the passport photos, cache serials, and the burner phone logs. "Everything's in here." She took the envelope, but her eyes stayed on me. "You've done more than most," which she said quietly. "You got him talking, and you kept that girl safe." "I'm not done yet," I said. She hesitated. "You're not planning to go back, are you?" "No," I said. "We're not going home." She nodded, then reached into her vest and pulled out a small radio tag. "If you need me, press this. It's discreet. Local signal only." I tucked it into my vest. "Thanks." That night, Callie and I built a small fire behind the cabin. She roasted a marshmallow in silence, her face lit by the soft glow. "Did he believe you?" she asked. "He always thinks he's in control," I said. "That's his weakness." She handed me her marshmallow. I burned it. I bit into it anyway. And in the morning, we packed what we could carry and left the cabin behind. Not because we were running, but because it was time to disappear on our own terms. We headed farther north, where the mountains thickened and the cell towers thinned. I didn't tell Callie where we were going. I wasn't sure myself. All I knew was Grant would look, and I didn't want to be found before Romy was ready to move. We checked into another roadside lodge. No cameras, no digital records, just handwritten ledgers and creaky floorboards. I paid for 3 nights in advance under another alias. This time, I chose a room near the back with a clear view of both the parking lot and the surrounding woods. That evening, I turned on the burner phone for 2 minutes, long enough to send Romy a text with the license plate of a dark SUV I'd seen trailing us near the highway. Less than 10 minutes later, she called back. "Grant rented it," she said. "He's close." I glanced at Callie, who was brushing her teeth with quiet focus, her little feet dangling from the bathroom step stool. "What do we do?" I asked. "You stay still. Let us come to him. What if he finds us first?" "You won't let him in," she said. "Not again." That night I moved a chair beneath the doorknob and kept the lights off. I barely slept. Around 3 a.m., a car rolled slowly through the gravel lot. I peered through the curtain. It paused near our room engine low, then it rolled on. At dawn, Callie stirred in the bed behind me. "Grandma," she whispered. "He's looking, isn't he?" I nodded. "But we're not alone." She sat up, hugging her knees. "He's not the same anymore." "No," I said. "He hasn't been for a long time. We just didn't want to see it." She reached for her sketchbook and opened to a blank page. Her hands were steady. I turned on the radio tag Romy gave me and placed it on the sill. Outside, the fog had lifted. The birds had returned to the trees. And somewhere nearby, my son was searching, never realizing that this time we weren't the ones being watched. He was. It happened faster than I expected. Just after noon the next day, a knock came at the lodge's front desk. The manager, a wiry man with a baseball cap and sunburned arms, came to my door and called softly, "Ma'am, someone's here, asking after you." I stepped outside, heart already thudding. I spotted the car black SUV plates matched Romy's message. Grant stood beside it, hands on hips, talking to the manager like he owned the building. He hadn't seen me yet. Then, from the woods behind the parking lot, 2 plain-clothed agents emerged. One walked toward the SUV. The other moved toward Grant. They didn't draw weapons. They didn't need to. I backed into the doorway and pulled Callie gently to the side. She peeked out just as Grant turned and saw the badge. His reaction was almost comical. A confused smile. Then a step back. Then a raised voice I couldn't quite make out from behind the glass. But the agents didn't waver. One showed paperwork. The other gestured calmly to the car. Grant shook his head once, then again. I could almost hear his voice now, confident, performative. Still thinking he could talk his way out of it. He reached for his phone. The taller agent took it from his hand. Grant's shoulders stiffened, but in the end, he didn't run. He climbed into the back seat of their unmarked vehicle and shut the door like a man who still believed this was just a misunderstanding. The SUV was left behind. I didn't come out. I waited until the cars were gone and the gravel had settled. Only then did I step into the open. Callie came up beside me. "He's gone?" she asked. I nodded. She didn't smile. But she exhaled long and low, like she'd been holding her breath for days. We walked back into the room. I closed the door behind us and turned the bolt. Later that night, Romy called. "Your son's in custody," she said. "He won't be going anywhere for a while." I looked at Callie, who was asleep with her sketchbook on her chest. This time the road ahead belonged to us. They let me speak to him once. The officers arranged it through Romy on a secure line, recorded, monitored. I didn't ask for it, but I didn't refuse either. A part of me needed to hear his voice again. Needed to know if there was any part of the boy I raised still left in the man behind the cell door. "Mom," he said, when the call connected, his tone brittle with anger and disbelief. "How could you do this?" I didn't flinch. "You handed me a bag filled with cash-forged documents and a loaded gun. You used your own daughter as cover. What else was I supposed to do? I was protecting us," he said quickly. "It wasn't dangerous. It was controlled. I never would have let anything happen to Callie." "You weren't protecting her," I said. "You were using her. Just like you used me." His breath caught. Silence stretched on the line. "I gave you everything," I continued, voice low and even. "I sold our land for your first business. I raised you in a ranger's cabin while patching roofs and boiling snowmelt just to wash your socks. And now you expect me to smuggle things for strangers just because I still love you." "I didn't think you'd open the bag," he said finally. "That's exactly why I had to," I whispered. He sighed heavily, frustration shifting to something close to shame, but not quite reaching it. "They're going to come after me hard," he said. "You don't understand who's involved. I understand enough. And Romy understands more." He was quiet. "Callie asked if you were coming back," I added. That broke him. His voice softened, almost trembling. "What did you tell her I said not?" "For a long time," I replied. And I meant it. I ended the call before he could respond. I sat there in the small cabin kitchen, the line dead in my hand, and let the stillness wash over me. Outside, Callie was sketching pine needles with the focus of someone learning how to rebuild trust stroke by careful stroke. The mountains were gentler in spring. Snow melt streamed down in silver threads between the rocks, and the air smelled of sap and something new. We didn't rush. We weren't running anymore. We were simply leaving. I had sold the house quietly through an old friend of Romy's. The paperwork was signed under a trust in Callie's name. The funds, what was left after years of giving and forgiving, had been placed in a long-term account that only she could access when she turned 21. She didn't know all the details yet, just that we weren't going back. Not to that street, not to that kitchen, not to the echo of someone who'd once called me a burden in his silence. We packed only what mattered. A few clothes, the sketchbooks, a tin of tea, the hiking boots I hadn't worn in years but refused to throw away. The rest we left behind, shed like old bark. As we drove, Callie watched the trees pass like pages in a story she was finally ready to tell. "Grandma," she said, "what do you think he'll do now?" I think I replied, "He'll sit with the truth for a long time. And maybe that's what he's always been afraid of." She nodded, thoughtful. "I don't want to be like him." "You won't," I said. "You already saw what he couldn't." Later that day, we passed the same junction where she'd once whispered, "Turn the car around." I slowed the car. Callie glanced at the sign. "Want to stop?" I looked at her, then at the sky, clear, wide, full of breath. "No," I said. "Let's keep going." And this time, there was no fear in the choice. We kept driving past the turn, past the past. Not toward a destination, but away from the idea that we had to stay small, quiet, useful. Callie rolled down the window and let her hand ride the wind. Her sketchbook was open on her lap again, pencil moving fast, drawing something I couldn't yet see. But I knew this much: we were finally free.